Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome this afternoon to our first workshop of the Hazards Out web series, all about household hazardous waste. And in particular today, we are going to be discussing what is going to change with the introduction of new mandatory separate collection on household hazardous waste across the European Union. My name is John Paul Judson. I'm really delighted to be your moderator today to guide the discussion. I'm also joined by my colleagues Vanya, who will be in charge of the chat, and Vito, who is in the back office making sure everything works smoothly. And I hope to have a great discussion with you all. I can see the topic has been of great interest to many of you. You were more than 130 to register for the event. 130 people coming from different parts of the value chain, including a lot in relation to waste management and recycling, and across various countries, from Belgium to Spain to France, Italy, Greece, Portugal, but also we have a small delegation from the Philippines. So welcome to you and thank you for joining. And I hope that you will be bringing, the diversity of experiences that you may face or have with household hazardous waste into the conversation. We also have representation from the waste management and recycling industries, consultancies, public authorities, including local authorities, academia, some extended producer responsibility organizations, and other industries in general. Again, your experience and your knowledge is really something that we're looking for as we're trying to build this professional community as well of operators involved with household hazardous waste. So please get involved in the chat and in the Q&A. You can raise your points, your questions. I will do my best to raise those also with speakers. And in terms of our agenda, we will run through a short series of presentations. And after that, we will be opening the floor to a conversation where you will also be invited, if you wish to switch on your camera and microphone and engage directly in our conversation. So without further ado, I propose that we get started and I can introduce the first speaker for today, one of the project partners, leaders, in fact, of the project with FEAD, Paolo Campanella, the Secretary General of FEAD, the European Waste Management Federation. Paolo, what is going to change with household hazardous waste? Over to you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. We will try to answer to this question today, and I have to admit that I'm very happy and also proud to launch this first workshop on Hazards Out. It's the development of a long process, and I'm very happy to be here today to represent our association. I am Paolo Campanella. I'm the Secretary General of FEAD, the European Waste Management Association. As you can see from the map on the slide, we are covering 20 countries with national associations from Europe, UK, and also Norway. And our members represent the entire waste management value chain. We represent the private sector of the waste management value chain, starting from the collection, sorting, recycling, recovery, and also disposal of any kind of waste, hazardous, non-hazardous, municipal, and industrial and commercial. These allow us really to have an holistic overview on the sector. And a couple of years ago, in 2023, we started an activity within FEAD trying to think about where the sector will be in the next years. We wanted to develop our vision. And I have to say that the workshop of today comes from this vision. Our objective is really to shift the European overall material use towards recycled material. And to do that, to reach this objective, we would like to have an ambition, a goal, a clear goal, to have the circular material use rate at a rate of 25% by 2030. We don't have to forget our mission. that, first of all, is to supply the European economy with secondary raw material and energy, and we have to do that in a safe and environmentally responsible way. To reach these objectives, we included 5 asks and actions, and one of the action was actually the development of a circular value chain partnership. So the objective is really to bring together on the table all the different actors, starting from the waste management sector, the producers, the public authorities, the municipalities, all together to discuss about circular economy topics and try to improve the situation on this. We made also an exercise to try to prioritize the sector within waste management and circular economy and try to understand where are the priorities. And actually, households hazardous waste was one of them. What is it? I know that after me, there will be already a presentation that will go deep into it, but just to give you an idea, we are talking about the waste that has the hazardous properties listed in Annex 3 of the Waste Framework Directive. We are talking about a wide list of products that becomes waste, and you can see some example here in the slide, but I will give later the floor to Nicolas Hulmès that will go through it, explaining more the details. Why we decided to actually focus on household hazardous waste? First of all, because we need specific collection and treatment. It has to be treated in a safe way. Household hazardous waste has its own characteristics, so we need to be careful. We do not also have to forget that it can hinder the recycling, especially when there is a misplacement. And we can think about the recycling activities concerning, for example, material that will go for food contact applications, or, for example, the recycling of those material that can contain hazardous substances that can actually decrease the quality of recycling. And finally, we know that this waste stream can impact the waste management system. I just think about lithium batteries. Today, we are having a lot of fires, accidents caused by lithium batteries, not only in those facilities that are actually dedicated to get these waste, but also to other facilities. We are talking about, first of all, the collection phase, but also in sorting facility, in recycling facilities, and also waste to energy. Just to give you some data, in France, for example, from 2019 and 2023, the number of reported fires connected to lithium batteries doubled. So it's a big number. And in the UK, actually the difference probably was even higher, especially if we consider the year 2022 and 2023, where the number of cases increased of 70%. So this is what we think has to be taken into consideration. So there are not only many reasons behind, there are also many stakeholders involved. We have to think about a waste that has different characteristics, that probably need a different variety of collection schemes that can be take back door to door. There are several or collection centers in the municipalities. There are also different way of treating when these the products reach their end of life, because we can recycle them, we can treat them in high temperature through incineration, or also dispose them in dedicated landfills. So we need to really have an approach that is multilateral, taking into consideration, as I said, the several reasons and the different stakeholders. That's why Hazardous Out is one of the circular value chain partnership that FEAD wanted to launch. And I'm very happy that we are launching today this partnership together with the partners that decided to join us, in particular Hazardous Waste Europe, an association representing the waste management sector dedicated to hazardous waste, and ACR Plus, the association representing local authorities and municipalities. So we try to put together all these actors because our goal is really to create a community of stakeholders that are interested at the topic and that are also available to share good practices. The objective also of the Circular Value Chain Partnership is to raise awareness on household hazardous waste. As Jean-Paul was mentioning in the introduction, we have to think about that since January 2025, there is the obligation at European level to separately collect household hazardous waste. We need to help the stakeholders to identify and defining their responsibility, ensure that the obligation is actually implemented in a right way, and also we need also to address all the potential hazards in the waste management facilities in order, of course, to avoid that misplacement of this specific stream can cause risks and damage to the sector. To do so, we have a plan, and this is already a good starting point. So we created this platform, we found the partners, and we said, okay, let's focus on organizing a series of workshops to reach the objective that we have. As you can see, we have a plan starting from today until mid of 2026. We would like to have 5 different workshops where we can talk, discuss, and show national and local good practices, investigate the potential role of the extended producer responsibility, also talk about the communication, the value of the communication to citizens, raising awareness to the producers of this waste, and also focus on the specific treatment of the hazardous waste. I'm very happy because after me there will be 3 other presentations. Jean-Paul already presented that to all of you, but I would first of all really thank the speakers that will follow. So Nicolas Humes from Hazardous Waste Europe, Daniele Ape from the European Commission, and Françoise Bonnet from ACR Plus. Thank you for your involvement, thank you for your participation, and in particular also thank you to the audience, to all of you that you are here today to join and participate at the discussion. I'm really, really happy, and thank you, Jean-Paul, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Paolo. So one thing that has changed is that Hazardous Out has been born and will be accompanying to some extent the implementation of this legislative obligation on the separate collection of household hazardous waste. So that's already one thing that we can say has changed, and you're building a tool to try and help facilitate that. Brilliant. And Paolo, you stay with us because, you know, we will also be engaging in a conversation after the presentations.
And so, no worries.
Thank you. And so, indeed, I can now introduce Nicolas Humes. He is the president of Hazardous Waste Europe. Now, if we're going to have separate collection of household hazardous waste, is that going to change anything on hazardous waste treatment in general? Nicolas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Thank you very much also to Paolo for the very kind introduction, and we completely endorse the objective of FEAD regarding the better management of the household hazardous waste in Europe. Even though normally everything should have started in at least for the 1st of January 2025, some countries manage that kind of waste from very long time, and others are just starting to find the right solution to appropriately collect and treat the household hazardous waste. And I will try to explain to you what is our view as hazardous waste management operators on that specific kind of hazardous waste, because there are some specificities due to the fact that those wastes are coming from the households. And we would like to highlight some very important points on the entire chain of this waste management, and also to warn of certain risk we see at the moment regarding the appropriate collection and treatment of that waste. First of all, just a few words about hazardous waste. Hazardous waste is a European-wide association. We are present in 10 countries with 185 facilities and with a capacity around 10 million tons of hazardous waste. Our three pillars are promoting traceability, non-dilution of hazardous waste with other waste, or to non-dilution of hazardous substances or hazardous properties in order to circumvent appropriate treatment, and also decontamination, which is key within the objective of a circular economy within the EU. First of all, I took two information coming from the European Commission notice on separate collection of household hazardous waste that has been published, if I remember well, in 2020, where we can find very interesting information and outcomes. So just for the basis of what I will say in the coming slides, here you have the list of household hazardous waste, and I have highlighted in green the categories on which I will focus in the rest of my presentation. And also something which is very important when we talk about that kind of big family, what are excluded are batteries, electronic waste, waste oil, and ELVs, just because they have their own management scheme, EPR scheme, or in the future for ELVs also. So it's different. So we will really focus on the, I would say, the kind of chemicals we can have at home and we use daily. Yes, I took the same scheme as Paolo, and probably others will take that one. That comes also from the European Commission notice. This scheme is very interesting because we have an overview of what's happened with the household hazardous waste, but I may have to say that there are some points on which we want to come back. The first one is, if I go to the final point, so to the destination of the household hazardous waste, as we focus on the chemicals in this presentation, I delete hazardous waste landfills, because the chemicals in general are not permitted to go in hazardous waste landfills. So I deleted that point, but we have to introduce the physicochemical treatments, because some of the waste, when we talk about acids or bases and some other kind of oxidant, etc., the main route is physicochemical treatment and not incineration and not also recycling. And now the big point, which is important to take into consideration if we want to have the complete picture of the household hazardous waste management, is the fact that there is a missing big player here in this scheme, which are the transfer stations who are in between the collection point of the household hazardous waste and the final destination. This body is very, very important because most of the important things for an appropriate treatment are managed at that point. Sorting, bulking, preparing the waste prior treatment is essential and is done in those transfer stations that are operated by the hazardous waste operators. And I think it's very important to take this into consideration if we want to have or to take the right decision for the policy decision makers in how to appropriately manage household hazardous waste. Now I would like to come to one very important point. Also, Paolo talked about that. There are some risks when we handle household hazardous waste due to the different kind of chemicals we can handle. And it also depends on the point where we are in the road of the household hazardous waste. So when we are at the civic amenity sites, points that are very important to avoid any risk of accident and specifically fire is to identify correctly the household hazardous waste. When you are households, you probably don't know exactly how to identify the waste you put at the civic amenity sites. The most clever way is to keep the residue of the product of the chemical in the original packaging. Then we have some information about the danger, about the type of chemicals that are in the container. So this is the best way. And if it's not the case, if you put, for example, the rest of your white spirit in a bottle of water, it's important to identify the product which is in this kind of undefined containment. So in the identification is very important. Second point, the training of the guardian is also key. If the guardian of the civic amenity site is not correctly trained in order to understand which kind of product they can receive and where to put the different kind of household hazardous waste in the different containers they should have, then we can be in big trouble with inappropriate mixture and then potentially some accidents. And then for sure the last point is have all the appropriate separation depending on the different kind of household hazardous waste linked to the chemical compatibility between the different products. During the transport and at the transfer station, we can have some uncontrolled reaction due to unmanaged mixture within the containers at the civic amenity site, and we can have some fires. I did not take the example of the batteries because, in my opinion, if we follow all the rules, normally we should not have batteries mixed with other kind of household hazardous waste. We can have fires on installation due to batteries because there is a mismanagement of the different batteries that are mixed together. And then if we have a lithium-ion battery mixed with alkaline saline batteries or other kind of batteries, then we can have indeed some fires. But if we take the assumption that everything is sorted correctly at source regarding the batteries. One of the accidents we have generally is linked to the swimming pool product that are outdated and can react with other waste and provoke fires either on the road or at the transfer station. So this kind of issue is also very, very important to be taken into consideration for us. And the skillness of the operators at the civic amenity site, the driver of during the transport, and the operators at the transfer station is one of the key points to avoid any risk of accident in each of the places. As I was talking about transport, 2 slides about that point. First of all, some of the household hazardous waste are also considered as dangerous material for transport. So this means that they have to be transported in compliance with ADR. The problem is that the requirements that are in ADR are very, very difficult to apply to the household hazardous waste. So there are some specific rules in some member states in order to find a sort of derogation to the ADR that allow a safe transport of the household hazardous waste. I will give you one example in France, but this is one among several ones we can find in Europe. So this point is how this issue has been handled in France. So we have now a list of generic UN number that are applicable to certain kind of household hazardous waste. You have all the information on the figure. It's a bit little, but you can find it at least in the FNAD workbook on the EDR. So then there is also a possibility, which is very important, to have a dedicated number for unidentified waste, because this is something that continues to occur at the civic anemic sites. Some waste are not identified, and this put a lot of risk on how to handle and transport this kind of material. All the inner packaging that are collected in the same outer packaging are assimilated to only one UN number. Some other requirements are also mandatory. The first one is to have a usable outer packaging. There are some procedures that have to be followed, and obligation of training for the different operators that are on the management chain, and the collectivities, the city, have to have ADR specialists that are appointed in order to validate and to check what's happened on the waste at the moment the waste is transported and go outside the installation. So this is an example of the kind of sort of derogation we can have nationally. But now one thing which is important, and FIAD made a big effort on that point the last months, there is a new paragraph 41153 in the ADR 2025, which provides an equivalent derogation as the one I showed to you for member states where there is no national derogation at the moment. So this means that we can have a safe transport of household hazardous waste complying with the ADR rules, thanks to this new paragraph that has been published in the last ADR rules. Now I will come back to another point, the collection rate, which is for sure something very important, because the idea of the European text is to have a good collection of the household hazardous household waste. This is the first point, in order to treat them then appropriately. We noticed something very interesting, which is we have a different collection rate depending on the area where we are located. And for example, I did not put exact figures because it depends on the countries for sure. But in general, we have a better collection rate in the countryside compared to urban areas, and it's even less in dense urban areas. There are certainly different causes for that. Two of them could be the first one. There is a lack of collection point when you are in a dense urban area, for example. So it's very difficult for household to go to the right collection point to dispose of its household hazardous waste. And also the fact that when you are in the countryside, probably you practice much more do-it-yourself practices than when you are in dense urban areas. But this is very important to take into consideration if we want to put in place the right collection scheme adapted to the area where people are located. Another point on the collection rate, we have different quantities depending on the type of household hazardous waste. Here you have the example of France again. Those figures comes from EcoDDS, which is the pro for the EPR scheme in France on household hazardous waste. And you can see here that the distribution of the collected hazardous household waste mirrors, in fact, the type of chemicals produced that are used by households. It's for sure an household use and then produce this household hazardous waste more paint than acids or base compounds. So we also have to take this into consideration. So the distribution of the different type of household hazardous waste, if we want to design correctly the collection and the treatment scheme, and specifically the amount of containers and the volume of the containers we need at the collection point. Another point regarding the collection rate is how it evolves with time. I took here again in consideration the case of France. I'm French, so I took that one into consideration. So since mid-2013, there is an EPR scheme in France on the household hazardous waste. And again, I focused on specifically the chemicals. And you can see this increase of the collection or of the quantity that is collected, not the rate, from 2014 to 2023 for the producer responsibility organism. It's great. The quantity are increasing year by year. But there is something else that has to be taken into consideration if we want to really assess the reality. We made a study in 2019, so before the EPR scheme appeared, on the quantity of hazardous household waste that were collected at that time, and we were at 47,500 tons. So approximately the same amount of household hazardous waste that are collected at the moment. So we can wonder why, but in fact, it's just because in France, the scheme was existing far before the EPR scheme that has been just put in place in 2013. And finally, the producer responsibility organism only increased its collection rate by taking into consideration or capturing, as I said, I wrote, the household hazardous waste that were already managed by the city and the hazardous waste operators who were working in B2B. So yes, there is an increase with time with the EPR scheme, but there is no increase of the quantity collected if we take into consideration the entire type of household hazardous waste that were collected since many years. And I will finish with a warning point. When we look at the Article 20 of the Waste Framework Directive, requiring for the member state to put in place those points, so separate collection of household hazardous waste and ensuring appropriate treatment in compliance with the Waste Framework Directive, there is a real risk. It's very good to look at the separate collection, which is potentially the easiest point in the two obligations. But if the member state does not have either the appropriate treatment facility and or sufficient treatment capacity, what will happen with the hazardous household waste that have been collected? So it's something that we have to take into consideration. And so it's a whole picture. It's not only a question of collection. And it's really specifically important today because we also have this export ban for disposal in the waste shipment regulation. And potentially some of the member states where there is no treatment or not enough treatment capacity would have had to export their waste in other member states within the EU. But with this ban on export for disposal, it will make the life of everybody very, very difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, for this very comprehensive overview. I think it's clear that you're talking about a heavily regulated sector. There's a couple of comments in the chat, which we might get into a little bit later on categorization. So what exactly do we mean by these transfer sites? So maybe there are slightly different ways of talking about the same things in different countries. So maybe we can get back to that later. And maybe just to come back also later on this notion of how much freedom is there actually to treat this type of waste, and how much regulation is also borne by these transfer sites, which might have an impact on all of that. So thanks a lot for opening our eyes. I think also the product slide was really interesting. That would be really interesting to hear from you in the audience if that picture that we saw for France on the products looks similar or very different across other European countries. Anyway, plenty of questions. Thank you so much, Nicolas. Stay with us. And I will then introduce our next speaker. That is Daniele Ape from the European Commission, Policy Officer at DG Environment. So we've been talking a lot about this separate collection obligation. Over to you then to tell us what you expect might change with its implementation this year. Over to you, Daniele.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul, and thank you very much to everyone and for the organizer, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, thank you for the introduction. I joined relatively recently DG Environment, and I'm working in the waste to resources unit, dealing in particular with hazardous waste. Yes, I think it's very important. The Waste Framework Directive includes a series of milestone obligation and important point. Is very good that we spend our time, we analyze each of them. In my presentation, it will be a short presentation. Spoiler is that I will not provide any groundbreaking news or something that probably you are not already aware, but I think it's this obligation, of course, is new, just kicked off this year. But the idea is to make a small recap from a legal perspective, from a legal standpoint. So a short overview of where this obligation comes from and what has been done so far to support in the implementation of this obligation. So, of course, the main legal tool, the umbrella, let's say the most important piece of legislation is the Waste Framework Directive, which include a series of provisions to address municipal waste stream. And I mentioned on purpose municipal, and then we will come back to the definition maybe later, because this is what is actually defined in the legal text, while household itself doesn't have a proper definition in the legal text. But the provisions are several. We have a general request, obligation to separately collect the municipal waste, and this is to basically to facilitate and improve the treatment in accordance with the waste hierarchy. So particularly reuse, recycling, and other recovery operation. There is a ban to incinerate. Article 11 also is important insofar it includes provision regarding the preparing for use and recycling targets. Already in 2020, we have some targets that kicked in for specific waste stream, and for municipal waste, this target will kick in a stepwise manner. And then it's important also to remember the provision, the obligation to separately collect specific waste stream. We have textile, bio-waste, we have waste oil, and then we have finally in Article 20 the obligation to separately collect household hazardous waste. And there's also another important point where the article includes the need to remove hazardous substances, which for many reasons, in particular in the context of boosting and improving the secondary market is very important, and we will come back to this late. So a bit about the rationale. There is an overall, let's say, the waste legislation includes this overarching reasoning why the separate collection is important, which is mainly to improve the quality and quantity of the resources, which can be fit for reuse and recycling. And this is basically in line with the current lines of thought set by the new commission, which include boosting circularity and boosting, actually supporting the development of a healthy and efficient secondary market. So the separate collection is actually the very important starting point. And also because this is linked to the need to increase in order to develop an important, healthy, and efficient secondary market and circularity. We need to increase the demand and the value of the recycled material. So the separate collection plays a very important role. And then, of course, we are talking about hazardous waste. The separate collection is important because it's the first step to work toward the prevention to a risk to human health and environment, so the proper treatment of this particular kind of waste. And then still linked to the importance of boosting circularity and secondary raw material market is to prevent the contamination of other waste stream, because this will reduce even more the quality and the quantity of waste available for recovery and recycling. So basically, the separate collection of hazardous waste try to prevent the fact that material are locked in at lower level of the waste hierarchy. So the waste hierarchy is always to be taken in consideration. But still, we always want something that probably is obvious, but we always want to keep in mind that it's okay to invest in separate collection and proper treatment, but every kind of waste management policy, scheme, or plan has to keep in mind that the prevention and reduction should remain the priority. A bit about the definitions. So as I say, the Waste Framework Directive includes a definition of municipal waste, which we understand it is a bit broader than household. In fact, it includes household waste, but it includes also something else coming from other sources, which has a characteristic they are similar. to household waste, but are normally subject to different different waste treatment schemes. Hazardous, of course, it's linked to the properties which the waste displays, and these are listed in Annex 3 and has to be identified according to the principle in Annex 3. And then the definition of collection, I want to stress on it because in our opinion is really a good proper collection is the beginning of any waste management process, and sorting at source is key basically to reach the objective to have high quality material that can be fed into the circular economy. As has been said before, we're trying to understand a bit what we are talking about. Hazardous household waste includes a wide range of material, are really diverse with diverse hazardous properties. The numbers and the data that we have, that as we'll mention even later, needs necessary to improve. The information, the availability of information and data is key in order also for us, for the regulators to be able to identify the most efficient policy option. Data show that the municipal waste is actually around roughly 10% of the total waste generated in EU, and the hazardous household waste represent roughly 1% of this 10%. So it seems like a small fraction compared to the amount of waste generated in the EU, but we know that they have they need to be carefully considered because they have higher potential basically to hamper the quality of everything else that in principle will not be hazardous. It could be a bit more easily recycled. We have also not only Annex 3, of course, but also the list of waste, which is supposed to has to be used and supporting identification and tracking, and then consequently proper treatment of hazardous waste. There are several, there is chapter 20 in particular, but there are several codes that can be used. What is worth mentioning here is the fact that we are working on the revision, as a targeted revision of the list of waste. We are almost there, close to the adoption. It addresses battery-related waste, but just to mention that there will be a dedicated code under the chapter 20 for municipal waste to support separate collection of lithium-based batteries. There's no obligation to separately collect it, but we know about the importance to be able, where it's possible, to separately collect and identify and properly treat this particular type of waste. Article 20 was mentioned briefly before, is the main reference for this new obligation that recently entered into force. So from 1st of January 2025, it's new. We don't have enough data information now to assess or draw any conclusion on how it is working, but basically is the basis of that. So we are talking about hazardous waste produced by household, has to be separately collected, and there are certain other provisions that they apply and certain other that do not apply. So of course the waste has to be, this kind of waste has to be collected and treated following the waste hierarchy. So we need to ensure that the best overall option is chosen, taking into consideration different aspects, including the impact of each option. Important to know that the policy development has to be transparent. This is included in the article which applies to this separate collection, and different economic incentives can be considered. Of course, the main point here is that whatever policy is put in place, the aim is to reduce as much as possible risk for environment and the human health. There are some other provisions that do not apply to household hazardous waste as long as they are mixed. like for example the control measures in Article 17, or ban of mixing, of course, because these are mixed, labeling and packaging, and record keeping that applies. So maybe it's worth recalling that they do apply once these wastes are actually separately collected or accepted by undertaking which has a normal permit. A bit about what has happened so far. Someone has already mentioned one of the documents published by the Commission. These indeed are a bit dated, but are still actual and still valid. Worth mentioning the guidance for separate collection of municipal waste was published by the Commission in 2020 and explain a bit the obligations, the rationale for this obligation, and describe also some of the success factor and risks in applying different policies, different options. It focuses on specific waste stream. We have the Commission notice on separate collection of hazardous waste. It includes this description of some best practices in dealing with several different type of waste stream. And then finally worth mentioning also a little bit more recent study published by the JRC, where the role of the citizens' behaviors is the role that the citizen behavior plays in dealing with municipal waste is analyzed in detail. Also give some hint on how to encourage the correct behavior in the citizen. From all these documents, some of the highlight are some of the success factors to underline that risks and pitfalls needs to be considered on a case by case, so you don't have one solution fits all. But different success factors include economic incentives. The EPR schemes have been mentioned, so we'll not spend more time on it, but they prove to be to have the value of basically make the producers responsible. Then there are another series of economic incentive like low cost safe disposal or pay as you throw or outsource door-to-door services. Some other success factors which have been recorded are some legal enforcement action, like for example requiring big building to have sorting infrastructure. Then there are different examples where customized facilities have been implemented, and finally also engaging in communication, investing in communication, education, involvement of all the stakeholders and citizens themselves prove to give a positive effect. Now, how to move forward? As I said, first of all, as I will remind also as a concluding remark, we need data, we need information. In particular, the policy making, and in order to discussing what can be done in practice needs more data information, and for that it's a bit early at the moment. But for sure, progress is made by considering that, as obvious as it can be, decreasing waste generation. So besides spending money and time in developing collection schemes and waste treatment, of course, we always have to pay attention to waste prevention measures. The public awareness is very important, so it cannot be something done only here in Brussels by the Commission or by the authorities. The public has to be, in particular in this specific situation, needs to be involved. What we have seen from the early warning reports that we have published and prepared, focusing on different member states, is that, of course, the separate collection schemes need still to be improved by using the right incentives. Again, the EPR schemes for different waste streams, they prove to be effective, and more investment is needed in sorting and recycling facilities. Some countries still, as Nicola was mentioned before, infrastructure is still probably not enough. Now to conclude, A many important point for us is information. So the information collected so far is sufficient to identify which is the most effective approach. We saw that there is a variability in good practices across member states, and again, as was mentioned before, probably the perfect solution needs to be tailored according to the specific situation, the area or the type of waste we are talking about. We need to understand how the member states are getting organized, which approach they are considering. And of course, we will continue exchanging with the member state through our normal channel. In particular, we have some regular meeting with the competent authorities. We have meetings where the competent authorities dealing with waste meet. So we will for sure just keep discussing with them. And just a final remark, that the effective separate collection remain an essential step. So it's very important in order to be able to talk about and implementing any further efficient waste management process. That's all for me. I can give you, thank you for the attention. I can give you back the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniele, for that overview. So what was interesting is to also give us a sense of scope, right? It's within municipal waste, which is just 10% of all waste generated, and then we have 1% specifically potentially on household hazardous waste. But I also take as a kind of action point, maybe also for this group or this platform or this network, however you want to call it, to look more into some of the data aspects and gather maybe more information that could be helpful for also setting future policy requirements. That might be something to look into. Thank you so much, Daniele. Stay with us as well. I will now introduce our next speaker, which is Françoise Bonnet, Secretary General at ACR+. We talk a lot about this separate collection obligation, but at the end of the day, it's about households, which means it's about municipalities. And as Nicolas mentioned, there are very different performances, between rural, urban, densely populated urban areas. Every municipality is different, has many obligations on separate collections. So what do you think is going to change with this new obligation? Françoise, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul, and thank you to FEAD for inviting us to be part of this partnership. I think very important to always collaborate. It is in our DNA at ACR+ to have this multi-stakeholder approach. So for those who do not know ACR+, we are a network of cities and regions trying to support them to circular economy and this big transition already for 30 years. And we always try to give concrete tools to our members in order to improve their systems, waste management, and more in general, material resource management. And we have an important focus on prevention. So really trying to decrease the waste production by changing our consumption and production patterns in the different territories where we are acting with our members. So you can see that we are in different countries and we are based in Brussels. And I have the chance to rely on 15 experts in Brussels, including some of them here attending this workshop. So of course, for municipalities, I think that a lot have been said already. It's quite a big challenge. I would say that most generally, this separate collection already exists. So I'm not sure we will have a big change in terms of this. I mean, with the mandatory separate collection, because it exists already, maybe not in a very efficient way or could be improved, but it exists. What is really difficult, and it's why I think it's really important to have this value chain and to have this collective intelligence to improve the systems, is that it's not easy for municipalities because, as it was mentioned, we have a very diversity of waste that require different type of collection systems. Most of the time they are in small quantities. And most of the time, they are diffused quantities. So it's really difficult to quantify them and to have a reliable data and to collect them also. So it's really more or less a case-to-case selective collection system, what is not easy to do. What is also not easy is that an occasional waste. It was just mentioned before this interesting report on the behavior of the consumer, the household. And here, it's not easy for the municipalities to have this automatism that usually you have when you put in a specific bag your paper or your cans and plastic packaging, because there are most of the time used occasionally those products that become waste. So it's not easy for municipalities to communicate on this system of collection and also to have the right behavior, because it can change from waste to another. Not easy, so quite difficult also for that. And it was mentioned before, very important to identify the hazardous waste, but for a household, not always an easy task. Another point, it has to be handled with care. And we need to guarantee the security of the inhabitants, but also the collectors. And on the same time, we must preserve the environment. We cannot put in the landfill this kind of waste, or we have to be sure that households they do not put those kind of waste in their skins or I mean in water, etc. So very important to avoid irregular disposal, and that it is really in a safe way. Also that we avoid disposal in the environment like illegal dumping and waste flushed down in drains. So very difficult also to control, and to ensure the safety of waste users and collection crew. And I would like just to mention maybe what a big problem that we were facing and trying to solve with our member during the COVID crisis, because from a day to another, we had a lot of waste considered as hazardous waste, and we didn't know how to secure the collectors, the users with masks, etc. So we also discovered how it was difficult to handle this kind of waste and that become from a day to another hazardous waste. What is also clear is that we need to offer different collection systems because of the different type of waste, and also because of the different type of territories. It was also mentioned that you do not have the same results and neither the same collection schemes if you are in a rural area or in a city or in a very density area. So we need also to adapt our collection schemes to this. So we have different type, civic amenity sites, mobile collection points for a lot of chemicals when we have dense population and we do not know where to offer a place to bring those waste. So we have mobile collection point, take back systems, and we have it quite in an efficient way, not in this particular workshop today, but with the batteries, it works quite well, the take-back systems. And of course, also door-to-door collection, not always easy neither, because of course, those kind of collection schemes, they have a cost. So that's why I'm happy also to maybe consider more the EPR systems. We have seen that maybe it's not a bigger quantity that is collected, But for the municipalities, you know that there is a big difference. Most of the time when you have an EPR put in place, an EPR system put in place, you have a cost shared between different stakeholders, including the producers. So, and we have to remember also that in the Waste Framework Directive, there is a general principle of the full cost coverage of this. So it's, I think, never the case, but at least it helps municipalities to cover the cost. So a lot of challenge for local authorities. Setting a consistent, centralized and proactive communication, not easy because we have different waste, we have different system of collection, so we really need to clarify sorting instruction and also to clarify how household can identify their hazardous waste, information on the different collection system option, safety requirements, ensuring to reach all part of the population, because all part of the population use in a day or in another hazardous waste. Defining also the cost-effective collection modes, matching household constraints, because if you do not don't ease the selective collection or the let's say the sorting at source or the sorting behavior, you won't have a good result. So we need to be sure that there is close to a certain number of household the place to bring back the hazardous waste, with opening hours, not always the opening hours during the day, because a lot of people, they work. So we need also to offer in the evening. And you know, like me, that this has a cost because it's like an extra hours. And we have also to consider household without car or with a car, because if you have to transport your hazardous waste by your own far away from your house, not easy if you do not have a car. And of course, always the same story. If you have a rule, you need to control the non-compliance and to give also an answer to the non-compliance, because a rule without sanction usually is not very efficient. Lack of data. We have noticed that it's really difficult to have comprehensive data. And for us, it's not easy to benchmark and to identify the best practice, because we still have really an important lack of data. And maybe this is something that we can work all together on this, and thanks to this obligation that we will get with the time more relevant data. Handling of non-household hazardous waste. What are the limits? What are the costs? We have also our budget, so cost-efficient system. We need to make a balance. The recycling also, what recycling routes, what implication on collection modes. So it's important also to know what are the recycling infrastructure we can rely on and where they are, in order to also treat, it was mentioned, the transport, and before the transport, when you gather all the waste with the same characteristics. So important also to really have a holistic view and a comprehensive view of all the system and the end of the system, also with the recycling and what we do with the collected waste. And for us, prevention. I'm happy that it was mentioned by our colleague from DG Environment. We could maybe try also to decrease the quantity of hazardous waste produced, and maybe render them also a little bit less dangerous, in order to be easily handled in the future. So thank you very much, and happy to discuss with you on the topic.
Thank you very much, Françoise, for giving us then a view onto the operations of municipal waste management. Lots of challenges we've identified already. It's not going to be an easy one, but hopefully we'll be able to work together on some of those. The mobile collection points were interesting. Maybe there's a few innovative collection models that we could explore also then in future episodes of this of these workshops. Brilliant. So I think we can basically bring up all our speakers of today's workshop and engage in a little bit of a conversation. So basically the rule is if you raise your hand, we can then bring you up onto the screen. So if you raise your hand, it means that you're willing to, open your camera and microphone and directly engage with us. Maybe just one immediate question to Daniele is, can we expect a harmonized categorization of what we all mean by household hazardous waste? Or do you expect different member states somehow interpreting this category quite differently? Just as a starting point, and then we can bring in some of our guests.
Good question. We should first try to understand, maybe talking to the member state, if there is a need to harmonize. This has never been brought because it's true that there's no clear, there's no legal definition of hazardous of household waste. But what is in household and what comes from a household, it's quite clear. We can work on it if we realize that there is a need. I mean, eventually the hazardous provision needs to be, most of them needs to be implemented by member state. So we are here to set the framework, but it's up to the member state. And we, as a commission, we can act once we realize and we have enough ground to understand there is a need for harmonization. We will see now what will happen after the few months of implementing. As I said, we have our channel moment where we can discuss with all the member states together, and if there is a need and stakeholder member state realize that there is a need for harmonization, then that's our role. Yes.
Okay, brilliant. And maybe also to bring up one of the points that was made in the chat, in particular in relation to packaging. And I don't know, maybe Nicola, Paolo could try and comment on this, because obviously there is packaging that is containing then products that would be considered hazardous. And there's a lot of legislation on packaging in terms of also recyclability requirements. So how do you imagine that interplay between implementing the packaging regulation on the one hand, but then taking care of the packaging that is containing the hazardous products? How will that be dealt with? Nicola, you want to give that a try?
Yes, it's a very hot topic at the moment. I can also provide you a sort of flavor of what's happened also again in France. You know, potentially that France is a champion of EPR schemes. Regarding packaging, and specifically packaging that are considered as hazardous waste, specifically due to the fact that they contained something hazardous before or originally. We have the EPR scheme on household hazardous waste. We have the EPR scheme on product and material coming from construction and buildings, where we also have this kind of waste, but others than the one we discussed before, due to the volume specifically or the weight of those packaging. Then we have the new EPR scheme on, how can we say this in English? Packaging from the industry and economic activities.
Commercial and industrial packaging?
Yes, commercial and industrial packaging. That will be the last point where we have this kind of potentially hazardous packaging. So we have at least 3 EPR schemes. At least for the first one, which is on household hazardous waste, this has been well defined. And this comes back to the first point on which Daniele answered regarding the homogeneity of the different kind of, at least if you have an EPR scheme, I don't say this is the best way, but this is a way. And you have a definition of the different products that are at the origin of the household hazardous waste, then you have you cannot divert from the different kind of household hazardous waste. This is a way, at least, to categorize the same way everywhere, because you look at the product, which is sold the same way with the same brand or at least the same kind of product everywhere within the EU. So it's just a proposal for you on that. Then you have the list of waste codes, which is also something which is homogeneous at the European level. So we have 3 EPR schemes. And what is important for us is that we don't care about what kind of EPR scheme or pro is in charge of this kind of waste. What is important for us is it's hazardous or it's not hazardous. Who pay what is not our purpose. This is something in between the different EPR schemes to take this into consideration. And this is a sort of trend we've seen in the last discussion we've seen in France, where the focus was who will pay what. This is the most important. And we said, no, the most important is to make the differentiation between hazardous, non-hazardous, and within the family of hazardous, which kind of, in order to have the right separation and the right treatment. And we were well understood, at least by the ADEME, so the environmental agency, on that. And we hope that we will finally have this focus and not who pay what.
It's interesting because it makes me think of the notion of eco-modulation, which, as far as I understand, is really on the packaging itself. I'm not aware of any eco-modulation that would be linked to the interaction between the packaging and what's inside. But if you have a hazardous substance in there, it might play a role.
It's even worse in terms of how you look at this. So I did not want to enter into that consideration, but that's sure that the eco-modulation will be on the packaging itself, not on the contamination of the packaging.
Yeah. Okay. Damien, Federica, would you like to intervene? We have you up. You had your hand raised. I just want to see if you would like to unmute. No? Okay. Maybe then one more question for you, maybe for Paolo and Françoise. So there are no targets, right, as such, linked to the separate collection of household hazardous waste, as I understand. There's no specific target on that. But let's imagine there was a target. What kind of target do you think there should be here? I mean, are we talking about a target that should essentially get more household hazardous waste into hazardous waste treatment operations? Is that the kind of target we should be aiming for? Should we be having a target on somehow the recycling of household hazardous waste? Should we have a target on, I don't know, the reduction of hazards in other types of waste streams that are contaminating clean recycling streams, let's say? What kind of target would you place, just to give us a sense of the kind of fundamental objectives you would have here? Paolo first, and then Françoise.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. I think that here the most important thing is really to collect this kind of waste separately. It's absolutely key. The point is that within the category of household hazardous waste, many things follow. And according to different kind of waste, we can aim at different kind of treatment. I mean, it's not always possible that all the hazardous waste will be recyclable not all the hazardous waste will be dedicated for a specific treatment. But I mean, if we think about batteries, we know that there is a huge potential for recycling of this kind of waste. If we think about the question you were raising before of packaging containing hazardous material that are contaminated, well, in that case, there is not a clear answer, because it will depend on the treatment that the packaging will need to be cleaned in order that to make it possible to send it to recycling, or if it's not possible to make a specific treatment, and then it needs to go to, for example, dedicated incineration, because it cannot be treated otherwise. So according to me, the first objective is really to increase the collection. So let's try to think about what is the amount of hazardous products that are placed on the market, and let's try to keep as much as possible in a separated way. Why? Because afterwards it will affect the circular economy in the whole value chain, because as soon as this waste is misplaced, then it will reduce, as also Daniele was saying, the quality and the quantity of the waste that will be suitable for reuse and recycling.
Okay, great. So the target would be a certain percentage increase of collection of household hazardous waste. Françoise.
Yeah, I completely align with Paolo. I think that the collection is the most important part for the time being, and for a long time. I think what we can imagine is that, of course, combining this collection target with the fact that if you manage to put on the market a product that become less dangerous, and so that it can be not considered anymore as an hazardous waste. So, you know, this kind of system, but the collection and the separate collection of hazardous waste is really key. Also, not only for the economic perspective, but speaking about, I mean, on behalf of public authorities, it's a question also of public health and environmental protection. So I think that it's really, really important to secure this separate collection.
Okay, and maybe on also the operations, we have a comment also in relation to artificial intelligence and cameras. So detection capacity on trucks that would be able to identify certain types of waste. And I think that's something that you've mentioned. I think it was Nicolas and possibly also you, Françoise, on, you know, the information that you actually have and what consumers do. And sometimes they can, you know, mix things together and make it very confusing on the waste management side. So I don't know, Nicolas or Françoise, do you see any potential there for digitalization in a way to help identify the waste flows?
Yeah, if I may, for sure, everything, all solution that can ease the behavior and this sorting behavior that the citizens need to have, is certainly really important. So I think that this is for sure something that we can imagine with digitalization, with I don't know how to identify the route thanks to barcode or something on the product that is the behavior, for sure.
Okay. Nicolas, are you aware of any developments there?
I'm not aware about any development on that specifically. I know that there are some, which is also an important point, some development regarding digitalization and artificial intelligence on how to perform and be more efficient on the collection of waste. And that is something that is really important also to make the collection of waste much more performing. But coming back to the labeling and the identification of the different waste, digitalization is certainly something that can help at the place of the household but it's mainly a question of make people aware about what they use and what they can do then with that. So when we talk about digitalization, it can be, as you said, potentially a sort of QR code or something on the packaging itself, where you have you get the right information, not only on the product itself, but also on what you have to do with the product afterwards, and make people aware about, as I said, also very important to not have or to decrease at the maximum the quantity of unidentified household hazardous waste. Keep, because it's always in a packaging, keep the original packaging, please. Don't mix it with other things, or even mix different type of I don't know, solvent and paint in only one bottle or this kind of thing. It's a nightmare.
And on this question of the categorization, there's another point in the chat there, which you know, there's the legislation that would say, you know, we're talking about household hazardous waste, but we're talking about something different than household hazardous waste that is covered by other pieces of legislation. So, for instance, batteries. Nevertheless, for people, they don't necessarily make those distinctions between different pieces of legislation, right? So there is a risk that you would put your loose batteries in your sort of residual waste bin. So the question is, I mean, do you agree that, you know, loose batteries in household waste have hazardous materials and should be separately collected and paid for by the electronics producers and battery compliance schemes? So do you agree with that, Daniele?
I mean, yes, we know that batteries, they pose particular risks, so they should be collected and treated. That's why, for example, as I said, with the battery regulation, we go towards that direction. With the current revision of the targeted revision of the list of waste, we go toward that direction. There is this new code for separately collected lithium-based batteries, which we want to support, because for us, that, as was mentioned it already before, one of the main issues is to be able to give the tools the possibility to properly identify and also track, because we need to track and to quantify all this. But then we come back to the fact that household, the older waste generator are people at home. So we come back to the need to communicate clearly, and because also to me here in Brussels, at the time it happened to me that I don't know actually where to put. I really have to, because I know how to look and where to look, but I have to really search for the information to understand where exactly. The management of my building, they don't even want to sort bio-waste because they smell. So information is clear, is crucial, and has to come from the local authorities, because we cannot reach every single.
Okay, brilliant. Maybe then one last question on that note, because you've all mentioned different challenges. In my mind, there are probably three that we can really highlight. One is the infrastructure, so collection and then treatment. As Nicolas mentioned, maybe not all member states will have that treatment capacity after collection. We have the information to consumers, but then we also have the notion that was mentioned also on enforcement and monitoring. I think, Daniele, you were talking about that, if my memory serves me right. Which one for you is the most important challenge to tackle, you know, to get this system going with household hazardous waste? The most important challenge, and then we'll close with that. Nicolas, maybe first. Very short, please.
Very short. As it was said, collection is the key first point, but we also need to take into consideration what to do next and ensure that the right disposal or recovery operation capacity exists then.
Okay, thank you. Françoise, where would you put the pressure?
Yeah, I think that, of course, collection is key. For the treatment after the collection, usually it's not our business anymore. I mean, we are responsible, but we do not have the infrastructure, not all the time. I think that, of course, the information to the citizens and to be able to have the right behavior and so identify what they have in their hands. I'm not sure they are always aware that they have an hazardous waste in their hand, and of course to ease the collection.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Daniele, a final word, a final pressure point for you?
I will put a bit of a pressure, considering that whatever has been said before is important on enforcement, because this is where we cannot arrive. We cannot get. Unfortunately, it's not in our power. We don't even have the possibility to enforce at local level, and enforcement is important, because we can write all the most brilliant pieces of legislation, but if we don't have the support of the local authorities to enforce, then everything is useless. And as it should be also done at EU level. So because we know that not in all the member states they have the capacity to treat all the waste and to collect the waste. So then here is where we should collaborate and try to work in a unique common market.
Bearing in mind there is also a cost to that, as François
Yes.
highlighted. And Paolo, what would you point out as your pressure point?
Well, they are all very important. We should also try to have a better idea of what we are talking about in terms of numbers, in terms of quantity. I think that's really key. Really, what is the amount of hazardous waste that is placed on the market, and what is the amount of waste that each member state is capable to separately collect? And there we can understand a lot. And then, of course, I totally support what Daniele said. Enforcement is key. And we should also think about that a good enforcement can also bring the development of certain infrastructure, because that could really give the possibility to the companies to know that there will be a certain amount of waste that it will be treated, so they will have the certainty that there is something to do, and there should be an infrastructure to do that. So there are small actions, but all of them are absolutely key.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much to all of you for having shared these insights. As we mentioned, it's only the start of a conversation, so we're opening here. There have been lots of comments and questions that we may not have been able to cover, but we'll make sure to include that in our future workshops. One point I saw also was on EPR, this idea of a mapping of the kind of extended producer responsibility schemes that exist. As Nicolas said, there's lots of configurations possible just on packaging, so I'm sure there'll be lots of complex mappings maybe that we could think about there. So there's a good few suggestions, and we'll try and take those up and work with FEAD, with Hazardous Waste Europe, and with ACR Plus to build the content of the next workshops. And there's also a link in the chat, and we'll be sending you a feedback form to get your ideas on how we can improve these sessions. So please fill that in. That gives us really good insights. And for the rest, thank you so much for having joined, for your great active participation, and see you at our next workshop. Take care. Bye-bye.